Hi, good afternoon. Yeah. So regarding transparency, Raj, one of my friends who's here, he told me to inhale the audience and okay, curious, how many of you here have worked in a bank or currently work at a bank? Okay, excellent. Okay, I'd love to talk to you after this during the breakout session to exchange ideas. Besides the challenges and opportunities, I would like to also share with you why I believe it is so important to integrate mindfulness and compassion in Wall Street culture. And the third point is how we can expedite that integration. Okay, here's a disclaimer. Okay. So in the summer of last year, I shared with my manager, Billy Tracy, my interest in introducing mindfulness. And Billy, I've worked with the bank for 8 years, and Billy is aware of my work and with the contemplatives and also with neuroscientists based on my background, which I'll share with you a little later. And he was very supportive. And then I spoke with a few of my other colleagues, and we started with a modest group. And so we got together, and during our discussions, we discussed why does mindfulness interest us, and why would it interest our colleagues? And those were a few of the points that came up. I mean, things like stress management, employee retention, happier workforce, and very similar to what I'm hearing from other workplaces, why they introduce mindfulness. Then we discussed, what are the challenges of introducing mindfulness within our bank? And unlike hedge funds and asset management companies where mindfulness and compassion-generating techniques have been embraced, banks are a little different in this because, and these are the 3 points that came up. One is mitigating risk is considered more important than speed and innovation at a bank. Things are changing with technology, and second is banks have a longer history. They're much bigger. Our bank, we have over 140,000 employees. So because of that, the cultural barriers are a little bit higher. And third, the deep pockets of banks, they're always worried about financial liability. Then we discussed, discuss strategies, how to penetrate and share the benefits of mindfulness to our colleagues. And so here, as you can see above, are a few of the ground rules. Again, not to use any religious sounding words. So leverage, again, don't hold to see it. So you can read this: leverage existing bank initiatives, maintain an altruistic motivation, and fourth is we knew that we had to work extra hard because the worst thing would be for us to share about mindfulness and if we're not able to meet demanding workload. So, we knew that we'll have to plan, strategize, write articles, and this would have to be done after work hours during weekends. So during the Q&A, if you're interested, I could share with you a little bit more details on some of the initiatives that we leveraged. For example, in particular, as I mentioned, considering the cultural barriers, it's very important that we're able to leverage some of the existing initiatives. So within a year, I'd like to share with you the results. So, our work with mindfulness is mainly in the Americas, within the 14,000 employees in the Americas. So now we have the support of the head of our HR, we have the support of the head of our investment bank, which were both very important. Both of them have been very openly supporting our efforts. And the head of investment bank, his support has shown that mindfulness and compassion is not something soft. These are, and the head of HR's support has been able to show that that has been done in others and it can be implemented within our bank. And besides that, the head of our organizational development is supporting it, the global chief learning officer, and many of our senior management. So we've arranged speakers to come within the bank, had many events. Most of the speakers, especially at the beginning, were people who are in the business world and have been able to engage, kind of live and show that it's possible to be successful in business while integrating mindfulness, and actually it enhances their business, and I'll discuss two of the speakers later on. We've had events where up to 1,100 employees participated. This is a boardroom. As you can see, all the chairs are filled, even a few of the desks, and conference rooms in many other of our branches were also packed to capacity. What we did was we created an internet portal system website where we exchange ideas, and after we've grown very big, what we did was we decentralized and created local groups, not only within the United States, but also in Chile, in Argentina, and in Mexico. So this way, all the local groups, based on the local interests and needs, were able to coordinate and have their own events. So we've recently, very happy to let you know that our bank has engaged with Search and Set Yourself Leadership Institute, which was a Google spin-off, to provide training to about 100 plus bankers, 50 in New York and 50 in San Francisco, where the bankers would be trained in mindfulness and compassion-generating techniques for the entire day. I believe Peter, I've seen him somewhere here, but okay. Peter Wang was one of the trainers from Google who came from Search Inside Yourself. So it's not only the bank showing the interest verbally, but to actually commit to say, not only from, not only having an offsite and paying for outside consultants, but to have 100 bankers studying mindfulness and compassion for the entire day, being out of the desk. I mean, it just shows you the level of interest and commitment. And I was talking to a few folks who was, and was telling them that that actually the big corporations, it's possible to that they would have interest in mindfulness. Yep. The head of HR spoke during our pilot session in New York, which we had on August 25th, and we have the one in San Francisco in early October. And one of the key takeaways from the meeting was that it's very important for us to think constantly how we can use the tools of mindfulness and compassion to benefit ourselves, our bank, and society at large. He felt that integrating mindfulness and compassion within our workplace would help us differentiate and compete with others. I mean, the feedback that I'm getting from our colleagues, it's prevented, helped increase collaborations, reduce migraines, things that many of us have heard. So next steps. I'm currently in discussion with a global chief learning officer who's based in Singapore to see how we can replicate our success among the 14,000 employees here in the Americas to globally among the 140,000 employees. And the other area we're discussing with senior management who are involved in training the bank's analyst program. These are the future leaders of Wall Street on incorporating mindfulness and compassion-generating techniques at the very beginning, along with teaching them about financial statement analysis and accounting. And if we're able to succeed in that, and if that is copied in other financial institutions, how you change a culture is changing one organization at a time. It's not like there's a Wall Street. It's a group of banks, and so this is very exciting, and this is an area that we're currently in discussion with. And I believe, so the thing from a strategically standpoint, while I'm in conversation with our senior management, is to constantly invite individuals who've, again, as I mentioned earlier, are living examples of who are able to integrate mindfulness and finance. And Lizard Cooper was one of them. She's a CEO of Athena Capital. And during a luncheon with a few of her core members, she mentioned how compassion gives her the competitive edge. It allows her to gain the trust of her clients. It has helped increase employee retention. And one of the important things she said it has done, which really got the interest of many of my colleagues, is that is not having a zero tolerance to mistakes, is that it prevents people from hiding the mistakes, and learning from it. Another person from the financial world I had an opportunity to invite was Jeff Walker, who's the former vice chairman of JP Morgan. And we had him come to our bank just a few weeks ago. And getting feedback from our colleagues, they were no longer interested in just in academic discussions on the scientific benefits. They actually wanted to do it and requested if Jeff could lead a guided meditation on loving kindness. And Jeff did that, and it kind of took me off guard that now the conversations on mindfulness was more at a much deeper level, and many of my colleagues found the talk for having very inspirational, informative, and also the practice very helpful. And one of my colleagues, she later informed me that she felt like she became a better person through that. I'm not sure exactly which way. Okay, so the theme of the conference is, so I'm getting to the question of why it's so important, and this is really what excites me, is banks, and here, banks, we all know, play a very critical role in the global economy. They are really facilitated business, and they're in the middle. Global economy, they are the heart of the global economy. But there's a really personal story that I would like to share with you. This is me. I was born as a refugee in India, and I've seen poverty and inequality and the lack of opportunity firsthand. So when I came to the U.S., I was very skeptical about business and finance, and besides being born a refugee in India, I was also raised in a community where motivation was considered very important, especially we were always taught to have a compassionate motivation. And so business was driven by self-interest. So I used to think that as a net result, it must be negative. And so it was something that I did not view favorably, to put it lightly. Well, then while going to college, I got an opportunity to study about American founding fathers, read the writings of Adam Smith about the market system. And I was just fascinated by these thought leaders. They were not driven by greed and to have bigger houses or make more money. They developed a system to help society and to benefit society. And I could see how the market system, got a deeper appreciation of the market system and how competition leads to efficiency, productivity, and how checks and balances were put together to mitigate some of the risk in the governance. And then since my parents, many of my relatives lived during the Mao area, I kind of had almost a first-hand experience about communism, and also about living in India from a socialist system too. So the market system, I've developed a great, and I felt like it's a very powerful system that plays a very important role. But the missing link is compassion. So what I feel is that what mindfulness will do is that integrating mindfulness in Wall Street, mindfulness will initially, what it will do is it will increase the awareness of our interdependence. It will make us more empathetic to the needs of others, and create a desire to do something about it. And then along with business tools, and would be very effective in unlocking the potential of Wall Street further. And from a poverty elevation standpoint, and improving, and early in the morning, they're talking about the gap between the rich and poor. And from a societal benefit standpoint, I feel that integrating mindfulness, which will lead to compassion, along with finance, and it will have a big impact on the global economy. And what I call this is more mindfulness 2.0, where we're not talking about, because even if you learn strategies about how to be aware of breathing and meditation techniques, we can have inner peace and happiness, but suffering still exists around the world. And unless we do something about it, I mean, it's not going to alleviate suffering. Yeah. So mindfulness 2.0 is feel like where we're talking about, we're being mindful about the suffering of others and developing and having a desire to do something about it and putting that into action. And an area that in my discussions with my folks in the finance world, in the mindfulness group, is I worry about, we've been very successful in bringing mindfulness, is very important that we remind ourselves that how I view it is, for my personal practice, mindfulness kind of gives me the clarity of mind, it clears my mind, and compassion gives me the energy to do, but you still need the business tools and the experience. It's just like a doctor. I mean, you want a doctor who's not only compassionate and clear-minded, but also who has experience and knows and has a good technology and all. Similarly, the same for business. And so mindfulness and compassion just enhances business. So the next question is, so how to expedite the process of integrating mindfulness and compassion in Wall Street? And one area what discussion is maybe having a group, and I'm already speaking to a few executives within our bank and friends in other institutions, is working together to see if we can have a common mission and a vision where we can, and then create that network based on that common mission and vision to exchange ideas and learn from each other. So with that, thank you.
So we're just now going to have a very casual conversation about some things that you brought up, and then for around 10 minutes, and then we'll open up the floor for you guys to ask any questions you might have, okay? So one of the things that I'm really keen to know is, let's say that on Monday, I was a fly on the wall and I was following you around all day. What would I see in terms of the way you bring mindfulness into the bank every single day?
Yeah, it's something that is more psychological, no? Mental, and work with enthusiasm and interest and appreciation, and just try to meet your deadlines, and it's. Yeah, and I mean, you still need to show outside all kind of expressions and tones, but internally you're calm. Yeah.
Good. So what do you hope these people who've been listening to you, what do you hope they will take away from what you've just shared?
I've tried to share why it is important, and that a lot of the discussions and it's very important. The mindfulness 1.0, what I call is more personal stress management, but then getting to the next step, where you're thinking about being aware not only on the current present moment, but being aware of the suffering and the challenges in the world, and thinking on how of trying to find solutions based on your own current expertise to do something about it.
Okay, good. So I know you have a little girl.
Yes.
What legacy do you hope to leave for her to be proud of in terms of bringing mindfulness into the financial industry?
That I mean, with an altruistic motivation, and that I made an effort to see how we can use mindfulness to enhance and to unlock Wall Street potential further, as mentioned earlier, to help elevate poverty and reduce the gap and create a more sustainable economy.
Okay. So I'm making up a story that I think maybe there was a specific incident that happened at work or something that you thought, if these people or this person was working from a mindful place, they would have dealt with the situation a lot differently. Can you share a particular incident at work, obviously no names, where you thought, this is needed in this bank? This is something that we need in this bank?
Yeah, I mean, I've had colleagues, I mean, at various levels at the, talk about how they've, I mean, like the anger that they had, you know, and they wish they could have more control over it.
Oh, the anger,
Yeah,
okay, good.
yeah, and they regret sometimes they have just out of control anger. And some of them have also shared with me like it's difficult for them to generate compassion and care for others. They know that it's good, but it's difficult. And then you've had colleagues I know colleagues who've had mental breakdowns, and I don't think this is unique for a bank. It's at many other banks and probably with other companies too. But it's I mean, it's been out in the press more. I mean, I think a bank in general it appears to be much better.
Okay.
Yeah, but there have been cases where you see cases where people are driven, and maybe I could elaborate on this a little bit further. So I've shared about how like the main purpose of mindfulness, is the way I've been taught from a traditional standpoint, is really to reduce our destructive emotions like attachment, hatred, jealousy, and pride. Yep. And how you do that is, I mean, there's a couple of techniques. I mean, one is like you just being in the present moment, and but then the other the technique is you generate the corresponding positive emotions, like love, compassion. And the other way is to understand the reality of things like impermanence and things like that. For example, and I bring it to a business case like attachment. Like if you're attached to something, to a project or to investment, then even if all the business sense makes sense, you still don't want to sell it. You know? And similarly, if you have like hatred or jealousy or pride, I mean, you disrupt the team and the environment. So what mindfulness does is that it helps, if you get to the thing, it helps remove those destructive emotions and improve the working thing. And so I've written a couple of articles within a bank, and the response has been fantastic. And the latest one was about mindfulness and impermanence, where we discussed some of these techniques. More, we are really focused on how to neutralize our negative emotions, like attachment, hatred, and jealousy, and pride, and their affiliates. Yeah.
Okay, good, excellent. So you mentioned that there's a program where you had 50 investment bankers in New York and in San Francisco. Was it Search
Inside Yourself.
Search Yourself. How are you guys going to make that sustainable? Because I can imagine for one full day they were meditating, maybe hugging some trees, maybe? I don't know.
No.
It's,
and maybe later during the break session, I would recommend you speak to Peter, and who's here, who shared his hand. It's very scientifically thought of. I mean, in the advisory board, they have people who are in the neuroscience world, like Richard Davidson. It's a very thoughtful process they explain the science behind and how it works, and and there's a lot of science and data and thought put together in that program, and and just the basics of mindfulness. But then they took to a global thing, and then how to integrate those tools into business. Good. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm assuming part of the program is they do exercises as to what they can do when they go back to work.
And then we have 4 follow-up sessions that we're going to have. And so and then we have a buddy team to help each other, to monitor each other. Yeah, so there's an effort to integrate that. And the plan is that if, with the 100 bankers, if we're able to, if the feedback is positive, is to replicate this further in other branches and other places.
Excellent. So when it comes to community service, can you share in terms of what the bank is doing in that?
The bank has a very big CSR program.
CSR?
Corporate Social Responsibility, which I'm very actively involved. And they have many different programs, So, like one, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things, But one that I've been very actively involved with is called SOS Children's Village, which I don't know if you're familiar with. It's a global school for orphans and destitute children around the world. It was started by an Australian, After World War II, there were a lot of orphans in Europe. And then when Europe developed, then that school was set up in other countries in Africa and Asia. And I happened to be a graduate of that school. So, so the bank has been sharing with the bank the good work of SOS, and now the support program in Sao Paulo, in Chicago, and recently Mexico City. So that's just one, but there's other programs, many other programs.
Okay. And then the
Nalanda is
Nalanda, is a part of, or is that a different type of program?
Oh, that's a different thing. Then the Nalanda project, that's a project that I'm working with a few of my friends in the banking world and in the private equity fund world, and also with a few of the friends that I met here at Wisdom. By the way, how many of you heard of Nalanda University? It's
wow.
I see many. Okay. For those who haven't, Nalanda is the world's oldest university. I mean, it was started about at the same time as Jesus Christ. It's up for about 1,000 years, and it produced the Socrates and the Aristotles of Asia, great scholars. And then around 1080, the university was totally destroyed. But before that, many of the scholars of Nalanda escaped to Tibet and reestablished the monasteries and the universities in Tibet. And I just want to share with you a little bit of background, then I can tell you a little bit about the project that we're working on with from the finance world. Many of the mindfulness meditation techniques that are currently based on the Nalanda tradition, and the monks, the Dalai Lama, and all are students of the Nalanda tradition. And so the studies that the neuroscientists are doing on the Tibetan contemplatives are based from that tradition. So that tradition is very important. And so that's after 1959 that the monasteries were reestablished in many parts, but mainly in a place in South India called Dugaling, and where there's about 8,000 monks. And there's a place called Mongod where there are about 17,000 people. And so we're working with how the monasteries support themselves is mainly through donations and support. So we're working with a few of our friends in the finance world to see how we can create an economic model to make that community sustainable. So that's the project that Jacqueline's referring to.
Okay, excellent. Good, thank you.
Thanks.
So we're going to switch gear now and hand over to you guys for questions, comments. So we have, I think we've got two.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
there it
Yes.
is. Hello. So I'm an entrepreneur, but I also currently work at a financial institution. And so, just to see your story is so inspiring to me because it took a lot for me to just get myself here. So I'm wondering, we've all heard so many of these benefits and you can put them up on a PowerPoint, but did you ever feel like, was there one pivotal moment where you just said, that's what got the buy-in? And what was it?
That's a good question.
I was, so to talk about initiative, I thought it's very important to get the support of a human resource. And I did a dual search of the head of our human resource in Google and mindfulness. And I was shocked that she had actually written a blog about mindfulness. Yeah, and then I spoke to her, I sent her an email, I told her about our efforts with mindfulness. I met with her, and I said, it would be great if she could speak about her experience with mindfulness. And she was very open to that idea. And in parallel, I've been working, I know you knew the folks in the corporate communications department, and we have a program called Learn at Lunch, which is very popular. And so I requested them that if they could, rather than us, the mindfulness group, who was a newbie, trying to put together something, we said we did most of the work, the logistics, but if corporate communications could, and many of our colleagues in the corporate communications is part of a mindfulness group, and I asked them that if it be possible that they could arrange that event, and they did, and they said they'll be happy to because they kind of fit with what they do. So this official broadcast gave us a lot of credibility with the head of HR speaking about her experience with mindfulness. And so before that, we had already created a website, an internet site, so that anyone who has interest can straight away join our group. So to answer your question, probably that was the time when I felt, wow, yeah.
Good, thank you. Ms. Beard.
Hi, I really enjoyed your talk, thank you. I'm president of a phone company in Canada. It's the 5th largest phone company in Canada. And we went through an incredible transformation in the last year and a half from a culture perspective. It's been profound. You spoke about emotions, one being attachment. Hatred is obvious to me. With the culture transformation, we have grown in attachment in terms of care towards each other, our company. We're more attached to one another. We're loving our work more. So can you please elaborate on that?
Of course, yeah. So when attachment, when we say attachment, again, just how we define, some of these words are in our language, so not the perfect word, and attachment could have many meanings. When we use the word attachment, it's where you have this uncontrollable emotion where you hold on to something, without any logic and reason. It's more from a self-centered standpoint, and it's very unlike, like, for example, like, that's when you hurt somebody when you're like someone like a stalker kind of a person. Like you're just so attached, and if that person, you are easily able to get angry. You are willing to hurt that person because you want it for yourself. That's when we say, you use the word attachment, that uncontrollable, not compassion like a mother to a child kind of a way where when you are attached now, you have no control over your thought process. You're just like obsessive, kind of the opposite of hatred, where hatred you kind of push and you again have no control over yourself. And the other test you can do is you check your heart. Both hatred and attachment, if you have it, the attachment that I'm wearing, it's not a very peaceful state you get in your heart. But if you have like compassion and love, you do have a peaceful state in your heart. So you can, even if you want to do a test, maybe that's another test you can do. But the attachment that I'm referring to is not like love to your child or love to your company, but it's more this uncontrollable type of emotion that you have where you want it all for yourself. And it can easily lead to jealousy and anger, yeah. But unlike the other, like love and compassion, which sometimes in the West, I know they get kind of equated the same, but I'm not sure what the perfect translation is besides attachment. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. The person back there with the...
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing and bringing this idea of attachment in the banking organization, to the audience. I'm an entrepreneur as well. I'm a pediatric dentist, kids dentist, and we're working on doing this every day in the environment that we work in New York City. But even as a healthcare provider, we find that wanting to be mindful becomes very difficult when you consider it in the context of the organizational goal, mission, vision, values. And in healthcare environment, for example, average healthcare provider in the United States is indebted to a great degree. And it's very difficult to be mindful when you actually are thinking about your loans, which is one of the problems we have with the healthcare industry. Banking is only that much more challenging. So when you talk about being mindful, the question that I have is, at what point does this conversation then reach all the way to the top of thinking, well, what is the mission of the organization? And do we have to make any adjustments in making that mindful? And comparing that, for example, the approaches of what some people call social entrepreneurship or social banking, or the likes of Muhammad Yunus, about just having a really different perspective around how is it that we feel pressured or make individuals feeling pressured in that environment. So if you could just comment on that. Thank you.
Okay. If I understand your question correctly, is whether there need to be adjustments on the mission and vision statement in order to bring mindfulness. Is that correct? Yeah. So, I think it does help to have a mission and a vision statement that has some kind of conversation related to how it benefits society. Unfortunately, I work for a bank which does have that, which talks about sustainable growth and prosperity and benefit to society. It has, the spirit is there. Yep, and I think I would agree that it does help. But then, if you go back, and as I mentioned, I used to be skeptical on the market system and on capitalism. But if I feel like, I mean, as long as you're working within the guidelines and the policy and the legal guidelines, I feel like every work is very important. And although it might not be in the mission and the vision statement, you yourself could have your own think about how your work benefits society, and then in your own life, lead a mindful and compassionate and caring. And although you have to compete and do what you need to do, play whatever game you need to play at the outward, at a deep level, understanding that you are contributing to society. And I think, and I do share that with my colleagues too, that it's, at a deep level, although it's to think how you benefit society, it makes your work more exciting. You could basically do the same thing. You could be a doctor, but if you don't have a compassionate motivation, you could get burnt out. And you could be a banker, and you could have a compassionate motivation, you could do fine, yeah. And I just think it's so much to do with also internal, but I do agree, especially, but having a mission and vision that is a little bit community-oriented would help make it easier to galvanize or to leverage it, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for all your questions. We need to wrap it up.
Okay.
Just one thing, when we were preparing for this conversation, you shared with me a quote that you live by. I don't know if you can remember it.
Yeah, I mean,
but I thought it'd be nice for you to share that with other people as a closing.
Yeah, I mean, there is many quotes that have inspired me, but one of the quotes from one of our elders is that it's the question is not really what is the meaning of life, but how to lead a meaningful life. And I found it very interesting personally. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. Yeah. So, regarding transparency, Raj, one of my friends who's here, he told me to inhale the audience and okay, curious, how many of you here have worked in a bank or currently work at a bank? Okay, excellent. Okay, I'd love to talk to you after this during the breakout session to exchange ideas. Besides the challenges and opportunities, I would like to also share with you why I believe it is so important to integrate mindfulness and compassion in Wall Street culture. And the third point is how we can expedite that integration. Okay, here's a disclaimer. Okay. So in the summer of last year, I shared with my manager, Billy Tracy, my interest in introducing mindfulness. And Billy, I've worked with the bank for 8 years, and Billy is aware of my work and with the contemplatives and also with neuroscientists based on my background, which I'll share with you a little later. And he was very supportive. And then I spoke with a few of my other colleagues, and we started with a modest group. And so we got together, and during our discussions, we discussed why does mindfulness interest us, and why would it interest our colleagues? And those were a few of the points that came up. I mean, things like stress management, employee retention, happier workforce, and very similar to what I'm hearing from other workplaces, why they introduce mindfulness. Then we discussed, I mean, what are the challenges of introducing mindfulness within our bank? And unlike hedge funds and asset management companies where mindfulness and compassion-generating techniques have been embraced, banks are a little different in this because And these are the 3 points that came out. One is mitigating risk is considered more important than speed and innovation at a bank. I mean, things are changing with technology, and second is banks have a longer history. They're much bigger. I mean, our bank, we have over 140,000 employees. So because of that, the cultural barriers are a little bit higher. And third, Americas, within the 14,000 employees in the Americas. So now we have the support of the head of our HR, we have the support of the head of our investment bank, which were both very important. Both of them have been very openly supporting our efforts. And the head of investment bank, his support has shown that mindfulness and compassion is not something soft. I mean, and the head of HR support has been able to show that that has been done in others and it can be implemented within our bank. And besides that, the head of our organizational development is supporting it, the global chief learning officer, and many of our senior management. So we've arranged speakers to come within the bank, had many events. I mean, most of the speakers, especially at the beginning, were people who are in the business world and have been able to engage, kind of live and show that it's possible to be successful in business while integrating mindfulness, and actually it enhances their business, and I'll discuss two of the speakers later on. We've had events where up to 1,100 employees participated. This is a boardroom. As you can see, all the chairs are filled, even a few of the desks, and conference rooms and many other of our branches were also packed to capacity. What we did was we created an internet portal system website where we exchange ideas, and after we've grown very big, what we did was we decentralized and created local groups, not only within the United States, but also in Chile, in Argentina, and in Mexico. So this way, all the local groups, based on the local interests and needs, were able to coordinate and have their own events. So we've recently, very happy to let you know that our bank has engaged with Search and Set Yourself Leadership Institute, which was a Google spin-off, to provide training to about 100 plus bankers, 50 in New York and 50 in San Francisco, where the bankers would be trained in mindfulness and compassion-generating techniques for an entire day. I believe Peter, I've seen him somewhere here, but okay. Peter Wang was one of the trainers from Google who came from Search Inside Yourself. So it's not only the bank showing the interest verbally, but to actually commit to set, not only from, not only having an offsite and paying for outside consultants, but to have 100 bankers studying mindfulness and compassion for an entire day, being out of the desk. I mean, it just shows you the level of interest and commitment. And it was the deep pockets of banks. I mean, they're always worried about financial liability. Then we discussed, strategies, how to penetrate and share the benefits of mindfulness to our colleagues. And so here, as you can see above, are a few of the ground rules. Again, not to use any religious sounding words. So leverage, again, don't hold, see it. So you can read this: leverage existing bank initiatives, maintain an altruistic motivation, and fourth is we knew that we had to work extra hard, because the worst thing would be for us to share about mindfulness, and if we're not able to meet demanding workload. So, I mean, we knew that we'll have to plan, strategize, write articles, and this would have to be done after work hours during weekends. So during the Q&A, if you're interested, I could share with you a little bit more details on some of the initiatives that we leverage. For example, in particular, as I mentioned, considering the cultural barriers, it's very important that we're able to leverage some of the existing initiatives. So within a year, I'd like to share with you the results. So, I mean, our work with mindfulness is mainly in the Americas.